Next question.
Representative Omar and Representative Morrison, two questions. One, I've spoken to some people that were detained here in Minnesota that are undocumented that are now in an El Paso facility, and they say that someone told them that no Minnesota detainees are allowed visitors. I'm wondering if you guys have spoken with anyone that has been detained there and if you're working to try to get them to be able to get visitors. And then my second question is, we have seen protests be peaceful, but MPD did say on Wednesday night that there were rocks and ice thrown at officers as well as fireworks. I'm wondering if you have anything to say to those protesters who were doing unlawful acts.
Let me take the first one. What? So last night at dinner, and in the last few weeks, we've certainly heard in cases where people have been picked up, many of them who had lawful status in this country. We've heard a Sudanese immigrant who went in for his scheduled green card appointment and was told that he wouldn't have his interview and was picked up, sent to Texas. Our office has tried to get information about his whereabouts. I know that Senator Tina Smith's office has tried to get information on his whereabouts. We also know that his family has tried to have lawyers get information on his whereabouts. We also know about a grandmother who was picked up as she was driving her grandchildren. The grandchildren were left in the car without a driver as the grandmother was taken away. We still don't have information, so I can go on and on in many of these cases, and I still have not heard a single case in this search where someone who was a criminal, undocumented, being picked up from the street. Many of the cases that DHS, at least to my knowledge, and I would love for them to provide us the dates in which they were picked up and from where in our communities, or what operation produced some of these people that they are putting forth, saying, they've taken off the hardened criminals off the street, because it is my understanding that many of those people were already adjudicated, already serving prison sentences, and many of them are still serving their prison sentences in many of the prisons throughout the state, and they're just taking their mugshots and submitting the charges of what they've been convicted of as a proof of the people that they're picking up. So I would love more accuracy of information, as they say they're the most transparent administration, which is the biggest lie.
What started as a routine question quickly turned into one of the most intense immigration confrontations in Minnesota politics. Representative Ilhan Omar delivers a fiery response after reports of detainees secretly transferred out of state, families left without answers, and communities pushed to the brink.
Told on American soil, I believe. It is the least transparent. It is the most corrupt. It is the one administration I have seen lie to us, even though we have an accurate documentation of their lies, even if we are witnesses to the lies. And then I would say, lastly, to your point, this, again, is one of those operations where they say they were carrying out an operation, and then we hear from Minneapolis Police Department say they just raced a random guy in the middle of the street into his home and then ended up shooting him, and there was someone who was pregnant, and then there was tear gassing being thrown into a car where a man talked about having 6 of his children in the car, where a 6-month-old was tear gassed and was hospitalized. So when we think about where the chaos is coming from, who is creating these violent environments, those are ICE agents. That's Border Patrol. If they carried out their operations in the way in which they used to carry them out, where we knew where they were going in, they would give a heads up to law enforcement, local law enforcement, that that's where they were going. There was an understanding of who they were looking for, and instead of storming a whole neighborhood, jumping out of cars, running up on people with massive guns drawn, maybe we wouldn't have any of this. And I do hope that the administration and Kristi Noem understand that de-escalation comes from them removing this occupation. It comes from them taking ICE off our streets, and it comes from them stopping this rhetoric of blanket saying that Minnesota is full of criminals, because Minnesota is not full of criminals. Minnesota is an incredible state that welcomes people, that is generous, but it's also a state where lawful people reside.
I would just add that one of the big challenges is the lack of transparency. We have heard reports that people are being brought to Whipple and immediately placed on a plane to Texas, to Louisiana. We don't know their names, we don't know where they're going. So we're hearing reports of that, but we're getting no transparency. When we went in to try to perform our constitutional duty of oversight and our legal right, I would add too, when we were denied, I made a personal plea to the ICE officers there. I said, Minnesota has been through a series of tragedies. We suffered the loss of Melissa Hortman and her husband, Mark. That was incredibly traumatic for our state. We then suffered through the Annunciation Catholic School shooting. What we need, and we had cooperation between federal agencies and local law enforcement for both of those tragedies, and now we have no transparency, no cooperation. I said allowing us in, letting us do oversight, and being able to report back to Minnesota will do a lot to bring down the temperature, and they shrugged it off and said, we don't care. So I think transparency is one of the challenges. In terms of local law enforcement, we just heard from Chief McCarthy of Mendota Heights about how difficult local law enforcement's job has become with the ICE presence. So of course people should not break the law, do not throw things at law enforcement, but distinguish between our local law enforcement and ICE and CBP.
For a more profound political discourse, please like, comment, and subscribe for more further insights.